Royal Communications and a statement from Buckingham Palace. During the King's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments, during which time he has been advised by doctors to avoid public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. The King is grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure. He remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. His Majesty has chosen to share his diagnosis to prevent speculation and in the hope it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who are affected by cancer. The news was announced by Buckingham Palace after the Prime Minister was informed, and the King had a chance to inform Prince William, Prince Harry, his sister, the Princess Royal, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward. My understanding via press articles is that Prince Harry will likely fly to London to visit Papa. Press reports are saying he will be departing today from California to London. They are also suggesting that he will be arriving alone without the presence of the Duchess of Sussex, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet Diana. The President of the United States expressed his concern and his intention to speak with His Majesty as soon as possible. Charities and organisations and national institutions such as the NHS, Maggie's, Macmillan, of which the King is patron, are all sending their support and encouraging others to prioritise their health and get checked if they are under any confusion or have any hesitation whatsoever. This is what we must push: the promotion of checks and awareness, and not being backwards in coming forwards, and pushing for checkups. Prince William was due to return to work this week, as you might know, after caring for the Princess of Wales, who is also convalescing at this time after serious abdominal surgery, and he will continue to do so while potentially undertaking other duties on behalf of his father, the King. He is overseeing an investiture ceremony at Windsor on Wednesday. This is one of his own engagements that was pre-planned, as well as an evening gala for the air ambulance services. And councillors of state, if you're wondering, are not expected to be called upon during the King's programme of treatment. The Queen will continue with a full programme of public duties, and I have noticed the goodwill towards Her Majesty this year. It was burbling up all throughout last year, and I will say that I accept some of the comments you've given me, which is that I, and I'm sure there are others out there doing the same, but I have certainly been giving her a platform and a pedestal of love and goodwill to counterbalance so much of the bitterness that she has had to put up with for, nigh on 4 decades. So I am very encouraged to see the warmth emanating from so many people, from so many quarters, and from the national press for Her Majesty. And this year, she has accelerated that soft power that she has, and she is becoming more comfortable in her role. And to be quite honest with you, behaving like an impeccable queen. And she has always been an impeccable royal, despite what anybody might think about their personal life and their personal histories, which people think they know every single detail about. Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, wishes His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. He says, "I have no doubt he'll be back to full strength in no time, and I know the whole country will be wishing him well." As for which form of cancer the King is experiencing, no details are being shared at this stage, except to confirm that His Majesty does not have prostate cancer. Another form of cancer has been diagnosed, and we will not be privy to that, certainly not at this stage. But it is not prostate cancer. The King has already returned from Sandringham to London to begin treatment immediately. The former President of the United States, Donald Trump, gave gracious words. King Charles has cancer. He is a wonderful man who I got to know well during my presidency, and we all pray that he has a fast and full recovery. I am told that we can still expect to see the King continue his constitutional roles during his treatment, for example, attending Privy Council meetings, his weekly meetings with the Prime Minister, giving royal assent to bills, and will still be able to trigger the election and appoint the new Prime Minister after it, if there is a new Prime Minister. Our duty, as I see it, my dears, our duty is to channel the royal spirit, and I am deadly serious. And I do pray, I do urge you, especially for those of a Christian bent, because our sovereign is Christian, he is the head of the Church of England. So number one, for those of you who are of a Christian bent, that means keeping His Majesty in your prayers. For others, you might wish to include him in your prayers, your thoughts, and your optimism, loving energy for the King and the royal family. Not placing his needs and wants above the rest of the populace. These thoughts and prayers obviously go out to anybody who is suffering in the same way or under diagnosis, but as the head of state and an emblematic figure, it is a way to direct those feelings of energy, of hope, and of optimism. And thirdly, I ask you, what you do is your business, my dear, but I do ask you, let us not catastrophize. These are grave issues we are discussing. This is a serious moment for the royal family this year. Sarah York, the Princess of Wales, the King. I feel I'm leaving somebody out, but 3 is quite enough anyway, isn't it, my dear? We need to not catastrophize. We need to not speculate as they would want. I know it's difficult to do at times, but we must not get exercised. We must channel the royal spirit. And on that subject, I will read a comment from Dennis Kearley. Thank you for your comment, my dear, who says, I would like to hear your take on Catherine's illness, and many thanks in advance. I'm surprised you are awfully quiet about this subject when there's many rumours going about online. Dennis Kearney, as I said, I do thank you for your comment. You are more than welcome to ask these kind of questions, but with all due respect, I am surprised that you are surprised that I would not comment or speculate on Catherine's illness. I'm very surprised. Perhaps I've misrepresented myself in some way, or perhaps you're new here, because indeed I do hold forth on all kinds of subjects, share opinions, and I gossip, and I share the occasional whisper. There's no denying that. But I have no interest whatsoever in speculating over a tender-hearted princess and a lady who has asked for privacy. And I'm just making this distinction fairly but firmly, my dear, with all due respect, but firmly, because I do not wish to misrepresent myself. I am not like any sort of trashy forum or channel that might delve into the subject or theories of conspiracy theory, this type of route, which is what some of these matters verge on. I don't know where you've been looking. I have to glance over some posts on Instagram and Twitter that I screenshot and bring to you for the broadcast. You know, things come up, stories come up, so I have to look at it. But I do not dig and delve. I do not look at any kind of comments. The only comment section I look at is my own here on the broadcast with all you wonderful fruits. But I refuse to live my life dwelling in those sort of gutters. I don't mean to cast aspersions. I can understand why some people enjoy it, but I do not find it a life-enhancing place to dwell. And if you found various quarters that do enhance your life and bring about positivity, then I'm sure they do exist, and very good for you. There are constructive ones out there. But when you are telling me that you are finding places full of not just you, Dennis dear, but other people tell me you hear this and you hear that and all kinds of strange things. I do have to scratch my head and worry about the karmic balance of it, my dear. I do not dwell in those types of comment sections or fora. I do not belong to any forum of such kind, and that are full of tawdry rumour. And although I accept that human nature has a natural curiosity, why are you looking at rumours about Catherine online? Whatever, I don't know what they are, but whatever that, why would you even look? Why would you even look? Okay, it is your business if that's your curiosity, but she has undergone serious abdominal surgery and is now convalescing. What else do you need to know? She is either going to recover and be well, or she is going to die. What do you think that we are able to achieve by mulling over what might be going on in the ins and outs of her private surgery that she doesn't wish people to speculate over? Excuse me for what sounds like a reprimand, my dear. I don't especially mean it in that way, but it does give me a chance to express my position on this sort of subject. I find it distasteful. Perhaps it's hard to know where I do and don't draw the line over what's gossip-worthy or not, but as any regular viewer will know, as much as I discuss the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, I have not once indulged any of the wilder rumours concerning Meghan. I have not once indulged them, despite a million requests to do so. Yes, I am told things behind the scenes by those in the know, and yes, they are discussed privately. Not the sort of outrageous rumours you find online, though. I'm speaking of families that actually know their family, and even they don't know everything. So how internet gossip for know these kind of things is beyond me. But to put the King's predicament in perspective, His Majesty joins 400,000 people in the kingdom who are diagnosed with cancer each year. 400,000. Globally, 18 million new cases of cancer every year. We're all touched by it in one way or the other, aren't we, my dears? It is seldom that one of us escapes its dark, shadowy fingertips, invading into our life in one way or the other. Some of you are living with it. Some of my most moving comments come from those of you who are living with cancer, or have recovered from cancer, or have loved ones who are suffering from it. You are not alone. And the King reminds us that it can befall anybody at all. And both my parents have had cancer, one more seriously than the other. I told you before how my mother came through it with radiotherapy and chemotherapy and all of this. My father also had to deal with the matter surgically. Very fortunately and happily, that matter was cleared up with more ease, but it was still a strain on us. I accompanied him to his appointments and to the revelation of his diagnosis, because Mummy happened to be on holiday at the time. Have I told you before? She loves Miami. Can't keep her away from Miami. She was in Miami, so I went with Daddy for that appointment. And it does take the wind out of you when you're sitting in that chair and you hear the issues at hand. 3 out of 4 of my grandparents had a form of cancer, 3 different types, 3 different forms of it. From memory, the 4th grandparent I don't think has, but it's been in the lives of 3 of my grandparents. The fact that it is so common does not make any of it any easier, don't misunderstand me, but early diagnosis is good, early diagnosis is very good, but with or without early diagnoses, the treatments are getting better and better. There are more treatments on offer all the time. They're improving. It's encouraging. And one thing we all might agree on is that this recent surgery that we were slightly concerned to hear about with the King was undoubtedly a blessing in disguise. It is time for us to rejoice. No matter where the road takes us henceforth, it is time for us to rejoice that His Majesty was dispatched for that surgery. For his enlarged prostate, it is time for us to rejoice, because had it not been for that, this new form of cancer in his body would not have been uncovered Certainly not any time soon, from what I'm led to believe. It is a total blessing. It's an opportunity to get in there much earlier than it might have been. So as formal as I am when I come to you today, and I will confess I do come to you in the spirit of sadness, I want to leave the message of joy and optimism in that earlier discovery, which is a blessing, and also the comfort of knowing that the King is intending to return to work and to business as soon as he possibly can and get well. So we all wish him best for his treatment. Where was I when the news broke just a few short hours ago? Where was I? I was in a dark room, my dear, surrounded by men with flashing lights and an 80s soundtrack. No, I wasn't at the club. I was at the cinema. I was at the cinema. A friend recommended a movie for me. All of Us Are Strangers, it was called. Have any of you seen that one? She gave it rave reviews, my friend. And I was actually all alone in the back row. And because I'm doing this carnivore diet that you might recall from a few videos ago, I'm very limited as to what I can eat. And I didn't fancy smuggling in bits of bacon, and so I couldn't have my usual goodies to sit on and munch in the back row, which is always the joy of it. I had to sit there empty-handed, well, with a little bit of sparkling water, but that's not quite as much fun. And I must interject here and just say the comments, as I said in the video, I knew not many people would watch it because it's a different subject, but the quality of the comments was fabulous. I mean, I still haven't managed to go through them all yet, but it was overwhelming, the information. So many of you on that diet or a similar diet giving your experience of it. Thank you so much, because it's something very different to what we're used to. And as usual, I'm blown away by the mine of information that I have here in the fruit basket. You know, we have a lot of silly times, we have a lot of confection, we have a lot of froth and bubble, but we also can chew over, literally, so many different subjects. You're great. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for that on that video and on every video. Sorry for interjecting there. But it's hard to express how grateful I am for those of you who are wonderful fruits. I was in the cinema and the film was good. The film was very good. It wasn't really my cup of tea, I've got to tell you, but not much is, so that's not the fault of the film. I didn't actually enjoy Claire Foy's performance in the film as much as I was hoping to. She was in The Crown, wasn't she? She was the first rendition of the late Queen. Well, she plays a character in this movie that I sort of warmed to her as it went through, but initially I thought she was rather wooden, to be honest. But Andrew Scott, who was the main protagonist, I suppose, was fabulous. Really, really fabulous. I don't know about Andrew Scott. I know he's been around for a long time, but great performance. And I mention this because, you know, the film, without giving anything away, it's about ghosts of the past coming back to haunt us. And he revisits his childhood, sort of in a literal way. It's not giving away too much to say that his parents had died when he was 12 years old, but he manages to go back and meet them in his childhood of the 80s, and he spends a lot of time in a sort of state of nostalgic yearning, if you will. And tears did spring to the eyes a few times. My friend warned me. She said, I cried. I didn't cry, but I sort of inner blubbing, if you will, a few moments. It was thought-provoking. That's what it was. It didn't thrill me as a film, but it provoked some thought for the Cancerian in me that is very nostalgic, too nostalgic, and very brooding on times past. It rang a few bells, let's put it that way. And when I emerged, you know, when you have that feeling, especially if you watch movies alone, as I like to do. I like to watch them with friends as well, especially for comedies and the odd romance, but I love going to the cinema alone as well. And I emerged, the night was dark already, evening had fallen, and it was mild, beautifully mild. Didn't even need the large coat that I was wearing. And I was walking through town, and you're in your own thoughts, and I'd switched off my phone, so I didn't have any of that going on. And then I checked it, and there was a barrage of texts that had come in from various people. And I could see them all flashing up. So sad to hear about Charles. What do you think about Charles? Yada, 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 yada. And it didn't mention cancer. I actually, for a moment, I've got to tell you, I thought he'd kicked the bucket. I thought he'd just died, because I could see all the, the intros of the text messages coming through. You know how it is. They flash up. I'm so sorry about Charles. Did you hear about? And I'm so worried. And I thought he'd gone. My dear. I thought he'd gone. I thought we've got King Willie in town. It was one of those moments, but then I checked and found out what has been disclosed. So it was a weird evening. As I mentioned, the word is that the Duchess of Sussex and the children are to remain in Montecito. I can't confirm this, that, or the fourth, but this is what we hear. Harry, my thoughts are with him. He is still Charles's son, as they are most certainly with Prince William, who has really got his work cut out at the moment. But Harry really has no option but to race to Papa, does he? I don't want to come down too hard on him today, but whether out of genuine concern, or because he would look bad if he didn't go, or because he has been hoping for an eye in the needle to wend his way through it, an excuse to go to the kingdom and rub shoulders with them. He might itch to try and muscle his way in there to continue his royal association, but he needs a real reason, like the late Queen dying, or some sort of life-altering event. Well, a cancer diagnosis, I suppose, is something that can be used, if I'm being very cynical about it. Perhaps he just has so much love for Papa, because he still continues to tell us, I love my father very much, and my brother, and my family. But it's a funny kind of love, isn't it? That damages and attacks wantonly, greedily, and without an iota of remorse. And to be honest, that's what sticks in my craw. Yes, he should fly to his father's side. Yes, he should be there for him. But it does stick in my craw that he might return there into the fold in some small way, under the guise and the excuse of his papa's health. Do you understand? But I will try and be gracious, to show him some grace and offer him the benefit of the doubt. For the moment, a viewer by the name of either Ella Ave or Elave, Ellaave, says, "Awful news. Our dear king has cancer. I have been teary since this announcement. Wish His Majesty a full recovery. Very sad about this. He's had many stressful moments in his life and has been very misunderstood. Our king is a kind soul and I pray for him. God save the king." And it's funny you mention that, my dear, because on the subject of God save the king, it went totally over my head. But I expect you might have read this week that there was some commentary on the late Queen's funeral, and at the end of the service, and it was written on the order of service, it's something that is supposed to be done when a monarch dies. You then proclaim at the end of the funeral, "God save the Queen," or "God save the King," the new monarch coming into being. Well, I had no idea that David Vines White fluffed his lines and in fact omitted them entirely, and "God save the King" was not proclaimed at the late Queen's funeral. It seems, let's hope it's not some sort of portent or some omen, my dear. I'm jesting. But yes, we do need God to save the king. Well, David Vines White forgot to ask for that saving, one of the most crucial lines, if not the most crucial line. It was totally omitted. David Vines White is the Garter Principal King of Arms, the second most senior member of the royal household that was arranging and organising the late Queen's funeral. This is at St George's Chapel, and at the end, as I say, he is supposed to make the proclamation, "God save the king," and the audience then respond, you see. It's a rousing finish and finale for the funeral, and it was written in capitals on the order in service, and as a herald, it was literally his job. Hark the herald, hark the herald is heralding the new king. Do you know what I mean, my dear? That was his whole purpose, as a herald. He must be hitting himself over the head, mustn't he? Purr, Mr. Vines White. But we can certainly make amends for that, can't we, my dears, and ask God to save the king. And as for being teary-eyed, my dear, as you mentioned, I haven't shed any tears over it because, as I told you, it's not our business to catastrophise, my dear, although I do understand your emotions, of course I do. But because of the news and because it was mixed in with my rather surreal, ethereal moment emerging from the cinema into the black night in reflective, nostalgic mood, yes, it did very much touch me, the news, and it touched me, not that I doubt that His Majesty isn't going to get through things just fine, because I'm absolutely convinced that he will. He's a staunch character, staunch constitution, surrounded by love and a wonderful wife who he really deserves. But it did, immediately, what happened as soon as I received the news, I thought about this, which many of you have seen, and I've made a previous broadcast about it again, so I'm not going to go into it. For those of you who missed it or aren't new here, this is a picture that I've still yet to frame, and I'm only going to frame it very simply. People have given me advice to mount it in glass and preserve it, and I was very grateful for all that advice. But rather like Charles, I'm rather simple in that way. It'll go in a simple frame, and I've got no interest in preserving it for 600 years. I'll send it on probably to William or George when their time comes around. But this picture from Charles to his... Oops. I'll just ruin the picture while I manhandle it. To his papa, I'm holding some cards so that you can see it, that he drew for his papa at the age of perhaps 7 or 8. It reminds me of what I always see in Charles. When you meet a friend at a very young age and they become a lifelong friend, or perhaps you meet them in their teens and they always look 17 to you, or you always see that teenager. Well, once I saw early footage of Charles gadding about at the age of adorable young child he was, with that slightly individual gait of his, roaming around in nature, drawing nature as he does, and you think of all the time he spent with his late grandmother who he loved so, and you read so much about how, and this isn't unusual within the upper classes, but there was an unusual amount of time spent without his mother, almost a couple of years away from home at one point, and even when she was at home, he'd see her once in the morning, and then if he was lucky, once much later at night, just before bedtime, where she and the late Duke would plant a kiss, but no hugs, we're told. And we see from other bits of footage so much affection in the family, but in other ways there was a distance, certainly between mother and son. And I've always seen him as a very loving young boy, and I think he still is that loving young boy. He might have had a few clumsy moments. He might have made an unwise decision in marriage or two, as the bride did as well. And he's eternally held account to that. Well, that's other people's business. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say that I've always been very thankful for him giving up his entire life to serve all of us. And I do. One thing I will say, and I don't see how anybody can't agree with this, is that he has given everything that he possibly can, whether it's through the Prince's Trust, now the King's Trust, or any one of his charitable endeavours that I bring to you all the time to show you. Who can argue with the fact that he has given us a life of service, and long may he continue to do so, my dear. What is he, 75? I would love it. As much as I know many people are looking forward to seeing King William V, I would be very happy to see Charles go on as long as his late mother did, or even longer, which would give us another 20, 25 years. And he deserves all the love and affection that is coming his way at the moment. Just like with the late Queen, most of us have grown up with him as well. And so some people are judgmental and harsh. But as we saw when the late Queen died and during the coronation, there is so much love for him. Much more than people ever knew was there. The silent majority, you saw them in their thousands, shaking hands, ecstatic to get a glimpse of His Majesty. And what's going on now, although he wouldn't want to draw out any sort of sympathy out of people's compassion, I think it will give people a moment's pause, time to reflect on what we have, what we must treasure and cherish. And as usual, It is a role modelling of it for the people in our own lives. Charles is not the only person going through this kind of thing. We all go through our difficulties. I have been through horrendous difficulties the last 3 years. Do I come on here and tell you all about it? No. And I'm not doing this to try and aggrandize myself. It's no different to every single one of you. We all go through things, but we all have the power to respond to them in our own way, be inspired in our own way, and try and choose the most positive. It's not always easy. I don't always get it right, as I'm sure most people don't, but what royalty does is gives us a model of how we can approach it in a life-enhancing manner. And that is what staying fruity and on royal duty is all about. And it is how we channel the royal spirit. So that is exactly what I suggest you do. Thank you for joining me, my dear. I really appreciate it. Do leave me a lovely, juicy, fruity comment and let me know how you feel. God save the King, His Majesty Charles III. See you next time, my dears. Ta-ra and toodles.